Howdy do, folks. This is the Solo Gamer, back again with some newly acquired retro game goodness, including a game that's been on my target list for a long time. Managed to finally grab a copy, even if it was just the disc. Guardian Heroes. Now, Guardian Heroes is often considered one of the last great Sega Saturn games. Released in 1996. It was released right around the time when the Saturn was nearing an end game. And it was honestly one of the best games ever produced for the system. Yeah. Anyway, if you want to see the anime intro, it's available. But Guardian Heroes was essentially a multiplayer beat 'em up. And featured a number of very interesting and different characters. And used a multi-level system where you could actually go between different planes as you fought, which allowed you to sort of switch battlefields. It's a simple thing, like you find that your party finds a magic sword, you get attacked, this lady comes to help you, and you kind of have to just run for it. And every character has different abilities, magic, physical talent, speed, agility, that kind of stuff. And yes, this was a very early CD-ROM game. And these characters have special maneuvers. Each one has their own unique abilities and special techniques. And the ability to switch back and forth between the levels is a great little feature because it allows you to move back and forth easily during combat. Now, the game did have some trouble, one of the big ones being the fact that it was hard to tell where you were at any given moment. Like, there wasn't any like specific indicators as to where you were standing in the map. Which there was a re-release on a different platform. I forget where it was. I think it was on Game Boy Advance or something. And basically, they added lanes to show you, hey, this is where you need to be when you're fighting, and then you just go from there. But it was still at its time significantly ahead of its game. But it was, I mean, it was at its time considered one of the best beat 'em up games of its era. Yeah. And this is definitely not a low or dark fantasy world. It is definitely a high fantasy, almost sci-fi universe. And this is where the game gets its titular character identity, is that these supposed guardian heroes, there's only actually like this dude, this dead knight. And I was like, bitch, this is my sword. I'm taking it back and whooping everybody's ass. Now, with this guy, you mostly want to buff his strength and vitality, because magic really isn't his strong suit. So you kind of just stick to the strength and vitality, and he works fine. But yeah, it is a beat 'em up RPG role playing game with unique elements. But yeah, you get the idea. It's an absolutely fantastic beat 'em up that I highly recommend if you can get your hands on. I believe the remake was on the Game Boy Advance, now that I think about it. But man. Man, you have no idea how hard it was to find this, but this game came out in 1996. The Saturn would limp along for 2 more years before it was finally discontinued in America, and another 2 years in Japan. And Guardian Heroes is rightly considered one of its best final games to come out from that era. Unfortunately, it was one of those things where like it ended up sort of just like being forgotten, because over the years, the less people knew about, the fewer it was, and the fewer people who remembered it even existed. And it's a shame because the sound had a lot of really cool stuff in it. Unfortunately, like it never caught on the way the PlayStation did. So it kind of ended up just on the back burner and then eventually just faded away. Now that being said, I did recently pick up some other games, so we'll grab some of that and I'll show you what I've got going on here. Cobra Triangle. No. Where was the stuff I recently got excited by? Here it is. Dr. Mario, 1990, right at the tail end of the Nintendo's lifespan. A very beloved puzzle game that kind of really established the idea that the Mario universe wasn't as serious as people thought it was. Which, to be fair, if you thought it was serious to begin with, you might have been misunderstanding things. But Dr. Mario was a legendarily fun and simple puzzle game. But your job is simple. You've got to remove all the little monsters, which I just messed up. There we go, he's gone. You gotta remove all the little monsters. And basically, each level naturally gets more and more challenging until you wipe them out. And then you go to the next level. And because each level is uniquely difficult, you have to actually be willing to try and think your way around these challenges. But yeah, it's nothing too complicated, but it was incredibly fun and made a lot of money for the company at the time, simply because it was, for one thing, a good game, but it was also unique to see Mario in something outside of his usual adventures. And a part of that was not unique. He'd done other stuff like golfing and what have you, but it was interesting to see him as a doctor, which would later go on to be parodied by a lot of different people about how on earth is this guy a doctor? All he does is shove pills down people's throat. And then someone pointed out, like the American medical system? Fair enough. It was also legendary for having two very cool audio tracks as its background. And that was actually a unique thing because the Nintendo's hardware was so limited, music was very difficult to pull off on it. But they made it work very well. There you go. So yeah, nothing too complex, nothing too serious, just a fun little puzzle game. Now, Gyruss, Ikari Warriors, Crychamp, Crykid, Icarus, Life Force, here it is. Life Force is routinely considered, it is the spin-off of Gradius, known as Salamander in Japan. It introduced a simplified power-up system, the two-player co-op, all that stuff. which later did become normal for the it did become normal for the it did become normal for them to do that later on. But Life Force is routinely regarded as one of the best shoot-'em-ups of the NES era. If not necessarily an easy one to master. Now, this game also was legendarily difficult, which, to be fair, that was hardly a shock back then. This game was known for difficulty. Gradius was no easy game, but it was also not nearly as hard as people thought. But this game was unique in that you didn't immediately have to backtrack on the level. But what is notable is that the game is a brutal game. And it makes no bones about that. Like, it is very clear from the get-go, this game is this is meant to be a challenging game. But yeah, super hard, super difficult, and immensely fun, but very challenging. And now here's the thing, if it looks familiar from some of the other stuff I've shown, well, that's because it's part of the same family. The Paradis Da games, or the Gokuruju Paradis, is a spin-off of that franchise, which would actually go on to be fairly successful in its own right. But last on the list for the Nintendo today is this absolute madness. Street Fighter 2019 or 2010 or something, the final fight. Now, this was weird because this game was released in 1990, right at the tail end of the Nintendo era in a lot of ways, and is often considered one of the weirdest knockoff games ever made, because it's supposedly set in a future Street Fighter universe, but basically just completely disconnected from the Street Fighter universe. Now, notably, it doesn't mean that it's a bad game. Game is a very hard game. But the thing is, it was so undeniably brutal that most people could never get through it. Like, I mean that literally. Like, this game was considered so hard to many that it was almost impossible. And a big part of it was you're supposed to boost yourself up with power-ups to make yourself more dangerous and more powerful, and that would give you the chance to actually stand a chance against the enemy. The problem being, is that, like, it still was a hard game even with the power-ups. But at least with the power-ups you had a chance. But yeah, I remember playing this game and like just it was so impossibly hard. And I don't have anywhere near the reflexes I do now. I did then, so. And of course, like there's other classics like the Battle Midway, which is arguably one of my favorite games ever made from its era. A perfect encapsulation of the shoot 'em up genre. All right. But yeah, the Nintendo was legendary for being one of those systems that it did the best it could with the technology available to it, but it was still miles behind the arcade at the time. Now the Super Nintendo got closer, but was still significantly behind that technology, but it was getting closer and closer every year that passed. And many of the games in this era were incredibly challenging. Mostly because they were built upon arcade machines which were designed to steal your quarters. Like, that was like the whole deal, was the fact that these were supposed to be quarter killers. You were supposed to lose your money. And believe me, we did. Kids lost their money by the bucket load back then to these games. Now, if you were good, you could play for a long time and be very successful. But I remember playing this game on the NES for hours. Just non-stop, endlessly. Surface forces confirmed. Begin the attack. Now that being said, these games are still absolute blast to play, especially in teams or when you were playing as a group or in pairs. But they were very challenging by design. And there's, of course, your super attack. You gotta take down that bridge. And she's gone. So yeah, you get the idea. Simple, efficient, a lot of fun, but nothing too fancy. Now, moving on. Let's go ahead and get over to, I believe it's my PlayStation collection that recently saw the biggest update. And Trilogy Resurrection, Memory Collection, Atari Collection. Here it is. One of the things that was really interesting about the PlayStation era was how many of the old arcade games began showing up as compilations for the system. Midway in particular was notorious for it. But it was a neat thing because it allowed for a lot of classic games to be brought back up and presented to a new generation. But they kind of went a little extra with it, unfortunately. So yeah. So Missile Command, Tempest, Asteroids, Breakout, Battlezone, Centipede, and Super Breakout. Missile Command. Now, for some of you, this game may look familiar. And if you remember Terminator 2, this is one of the games that John Connor was playing at the arcade. But each game is faithfully recreated and they run exceptionally well. These were good, solid compilations that ran very faithfully and efficiently. And they were pretty good, all things considered. Now, next on the list is Bloody Roar 2. The New Bleed. Now, I showed you Bloody Roar in a previous video. And that was... I mean, the Bloody Roar series is a series I would love to see come back. Because they are such a good series. But they were a product of their era, and I don't know if Sony or Hudson or any of the companies now would have the nerve or the balls to come back and do a series like this now. I mean, seriously, look at some of the shit they put out recently. God of War Laundry, thank you very much. And seriously, bad enough that you're trying to staple the God of War series name to that mess. But then like the gelatinous cube and the talking sword, it's like, no, enough. Arcade.
Jenny the bat, Hugo the wolf.
Yes. Because Sega wasn't the only one doing female bats back then. Speaking of which, they had like they had a there was a comic in the what do you call it? In the DC IDW crossover, where they kind of implied that Lex Luthor banged Rogue the Bat, and I'm like, what the hell? But okay, yeah, I kind of get it. Oh, brutal and efficient. But yeah, like this was back when games were completely unapologetic. See what I mean?
You win.
You're sexy when you're in pain.
Yeah, she is also very much a hedonist and a what's it called?
The mole.
She's a sadist. She's sadistic and definitely a hedonist. But yeah, like they didn't care. They knew exactly what they were doing. And like her, when you transform her, her special ability is that she can float with the wings, which makes her way more agile.
Get ready. Fight.
But yeah, you get the idea. And all the other characters from the original game were there. They were all present. It was a complete compilation of that entire run. Alright. Where was the next one on my list? Oh, I also got the Final Fantasy anthologies for my collection just because I wanted to have them. I am looking for Chronicles, but the one I want to show you today is this. And this will be the last one for this video because I'm already running behind on it. But this is a game that actually a lot of people learned about because of a sequel that came out on like the Game Boy Advance called, and that was transferred over to other games, but this never was. There was a Gekido game, a 2D brawler, that came up. Oh yeah, back when Interplay existed. I remember that. Oh, good times before they imploded. But this is the original Gekido Urban Fighters, and it is arguably, like, it came out in 2000. And in many ways, it was arguably like one of the last big PS1 releases. But it follows on from like Fighting Force and its ilk.
Travis, Michelle, Ushi, Tetsuo, Travis.
And I'll show you here in a moment how it plays, but it was legendary for being one of the most interesting 3D brawlers ever produced at its time. It was also legendary for having just like a wrecked out, just hardcore metal soundtrack. It was also well known for having like fairly destructible environments. And characters had super moves, special abilities, and all kinds of stuff. Do not make me kick the dog. I don't like kicking the dog, but I gotta kick the dog. Sorry. I am sorry, puppy. But yeah, as you can see, the game controls. The game was very much a sort of 3D brawler, but what made it stand out was how fast-paced it was. To be fair, I don't recall how to do pickups or anything like that. It's been a long dang time since I played the game. I'll have to look up the controls later, but it's very intuitive. Like, it is literally just pick up and go. See? Oh. Oh. Pickup is literally just kneel down. Yeah, the game was well regarded for being an absolutely phenomenal beat 'em up. But you get the idea. It's a solid, energetic, very intense beat 'em up that just feels good. And I highly recommend it if you're a fan of the genre, because it feels intense and powerful and plays very smoothly. Alright, anything else on here that I need to think about? No, I think that's it for now. Alright, so that'll do it for today. This is the Solo Gamer signing out. And we'll see you all again next time, where I'm going to be doing some more Dead as Disco. And I'll probably be putting them up around the same time as I do this. So I will see you all later. Solo Gamer signing out.